Good evening, everyone. Severe Weather Team 9 meteorologist Nathan John joining you live for this edition of Nate at 8. And boy, what a hot, humid day across the Ohio Valley. But interestingly enough, Wheeling, Ohio County Airport did not hit 90. Everywhere else around the airport did, but Wheeling, Ohio County Airport coming up short. 88 degrees was the high. And Chief Meteorologist Jeff Exline brought out a good point that we have yet to hit so far for the month of July. 90 degrees at the airport. Hit it several times last month, but have yet to hit it so far for the month of July. And it's likely going to be a harder task to achieve at the airport here over the next few days because we're going to start to track not only more cloud cover, but a return of some showers and thunderstorms. And that's a bit about what we're going to be touching on here for this edition of Nate at 8, that return of cloud cover, that return of some showers and thunderstorms. Does it remain hot? Yes. But, with respect to today, I think technically we can trend a little bit cooler through the weekend. But the kicker is you factor in that humidity, it still feels like it's in the 90s. So, yeah, I think highs are more mid-upper 80s for a lot of this stretch through the weekend. But when you factor in unbearably humid conditions, it still feels like it's in the 90s. It's still just rather hot and humid at this point on as we go really over the next week. But we'll get to tracking out those temperatures because the good news is there is some relief in sight to this hot and humid condition, this hot and humid stretch that we'll have in place through the weekend. There is an end in sight. So we'll get to that for this edition of Nate at 8. Yes, we'll discuss rain chances. We'll map out that rain threat as we go into the weekend. And yes, we'll also talk about potential impacts, which I think the main concern is going to be localized flooding, but we'll touch on that potential for impacts as well and what to watch for as we go through the weekend also coming up. So without further ado, let's jump into things. Thank you all so much for joining me for this edition of 8 at 8. Our current temperatures across the region right now are mid-upper 80s. Again, this is coming off of highs that for most of us at least reached that 90-degree mark. We factored in that humidity and it felt well in the 90s to even some 100-degree readings for this afternoon. Our comfort index, those current dew points right now hovering around that 70-degree mark, so anywhere from uncomfortable to unbearably humid. And this is the exact range that we're likely just going to stay in here as we go not only for tomorrow, but as we go through the weekend. Yeah, there's no drop here over the next 5 days likely. And if we do, it's very little. We may fall just into the 60s, but, anywhere from unbearably humid to uncomfortably humid. And for most of it, it's unbearable. We're in the 70s for a lot of the stretch. And we'll see just how high those dew points climb. 75 plus is uncommon for us here in the Ohio Valley. It is not common to see that dew point reach to that extent at the Wheeling, Ohio County Airport. We'll see just how many times over the stretch we get a dew point 75 plus. But likely for most of it, it's more lower 70s, around 70 for a dew point, which again, still unbearably humid. 75, really more tropical. That's more of that humidity that you deal into more of a tropical air mass, not for us here in the Ohio Valley. So yeah, certainly uncommon, but it is possible here over the next few days. So like I said, even despite our highs, which are likely more mid-upper 80s going through the weekend, notice that heat index still likely reaching around the mid-90s. So keep in mind when we talk about the heat index, how hot it feels, right? And the whole science behind this is as we sweat, that sweat typically evaporates, and that actually helps cool us. And when we're dealing with that lower humidity, the sweat that our body's producing is evaporating. So for us, it feels more comfortable, right? Body can naturally help cool itself on a warm day with low humidity. But what happens is when we have higher humidity present, those dew points start to climb in the 70s, with more moisture present in the atmosphere, that rate of evaporation, the amount of sweat that's getting evaporated off your skin is a lot less. That's how we get sweaty, right? Not the great topic of conversation, but that's how we end up sweaty. The sweat's not evaporating and we're not cooling ourselves. We lose that natural cooling process and then it feels hotter to us. That's why. That's why the heat index is into play. That's why it feels hotter to us. And despite our highs, like the more mid-upper 80s, it can feel even towards the mid-90s or around there over the next 3 days. I will watch early next week. I wouldn't be surprised if the heat index can creep back closer to 100 degrees. I don't think there's many of any of us under a heat advisory here over the next 3 days, but watch early next week, our highs can get back to around 90. If they get into the 90s, in addition to some unbearably humid conditions, that's when I think we could start to near near, maybe reach 100 degrees into the lower 100s for heat index. That would prompt a heat advisory. It was in effect for areas along I-77 today. Some locations in the region did hit that threshold of 100 degrees for heat index. I don't think many of us get that over the next 3 days, but watch Monday and Tuesday. I wouldn't be surprised. I think that's our next chance with those high temperatures back to around 90, where we could see a heat advisory issued early next week. So warm, muggy, hot, humid. That's our nights. That's our afternoons. But the good news is in sight. So we've got to talk a lot about the bad news here over the next week, going into the middle of next week. But the good news is, look what happens as the new month arrives, pretty much in line with it. But the very tail end of this month and the beginning of August, notice what happens. So notice those overnight lows, how much they drop down. Great evidence that we're not only dealing with a bit of a cooler stretch of weather, highs back lower 80s, upper 70s, but also the drop in humidity, allowing those overnight lows to then fall back upper 50s, around 60. So we are repeating, what we've seen for a lot of the past month in terms of it being unbearably humid and warm at night, hot in the afternoon. But notice we don't have to wait another month before we get more relief. So it is different in that time. We've got a good at least week stretch here of dealing with some coming off of what we had for yesterday when that humidity ramped up throughout the day, adding a week from one Wednesday to the next. That's the stretch of a week long of dealing with some hot and humid conditions. But here, as we look ahead going into next Thursday, Friday, that's when some relief is in sight. So we don't have to wait too long. Yes, it's a pretty unbearable stretch here near term, but at least the end is in sight. We can all hold on to the fact that there is more relief in sight going into the beginning of August. Austin, good evening. Another hot, miserable summer day. Really hoping for some cooler August weather. Austin, great news for you there as we change over into the month of August, and the very beginning of the month is looking cooler and more comfortable for us. Hello there, Bluegill. Another nice morning. Bluegill reporting. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. Not happy about the heat index. It can cool down big time in Austin. Again, good news there that the relief is in sight. Pretty rough here near term, but the relief in sight for the beginning of August. So another question is, of course, how long does it stick around, right? It arrives in the beginning of August, but you may be guessing that, yes, not the entire month is likely ending up that way. And we look at the long range forecast, as you'll notice that end of July, beginning of August, and even that first week of August, still favoring a cooler pattern in place, the lower humidity. But as we start to get to the middle of August, that into that second week of August, a warm up, it does likely return. No surprise, right? We can't string together too long of a stretch here of some nice weather. But yes, it does likely start to warm up then once we get past that initial start of August into the second week. But at least we've got, a nice start to August ahead for us. The relief from the humid conditions and the hot conditions, they are in sight. We'll have a bit of a cool down likely, at least for the beginning of August. But yes, it can pick back up. It looking better odds to favor above normal temperatures going into that second week of August than below normal temperatures at that point, looking ahead in your long range forecast. Becky, hello. And Shelly, just praying there's no really severe thunderstorms with this heat. We'll touch on the potential for impacts with the return of showers and thunderstorms in just a minute. And hello there, Dory. Thank you all for tuning in. Also saying, hoping the rain for the weekend isn't going to be too hard. And we'll get to that as well. So we touched on those temperatures, the humidity, and some relief that's in sight. Now let's jump to the precipitation coming our way. So clouds and radar still showing some quiet conditions this evening. We'll maintain likely some quiet conditions overnight. Good odds that we're staying dry, but we'll watch early as tomorrow morning. There's that potential to deal with a shower thunderstorm, more isolated, but there is that potential joining staying with us for that beginning of Friday of something more isolated, but then notice the coverage will pick up into the afternoon. So maybe spotting a shower thunderstorm for the first half of your Friday, but it is more likely that we'll spot those showers and thunderstorms in the afternoon, continuing then into the evening with, I would say, at least a few with us even into Friday night, continuing into Saturday morning, and then coverage will further pick up with more scattered showers and thunderstorms Saturday afternoon. A few of those again continuing into Saturday night, Sunday morning, and then more scattered showers and thunderstorms throughout the day Sunday. So similar It's a similar pattern in place the next 3 days. The emphasis will be into the afternoon hours and evening hours for those scattered showers and thunderstorms. No surprise there, right? 'Tis the season that, typically we're dealing with most of our activity in the afternoon, evening, largely driven by, the heat, the peak of the heat into the afternoon hours. So we'll deal with likely most of those showers and thunderstorms falling in the afternoon and evening. But, we still have the potential for at least a few continuing overnight for Friday night, Saturday night, and the potential for something more isolated in the morning. But certainly the emphasis as we go over the next 3 days will be in the afternoon and evening. Rain chances then look to further lower early next week. That's where we have more of that isolated pop-up potential into the afternoon, evening hours on Monday and Tuesday. But activity looks less organized early next week with respect here to the next 3 days. So then there comes the question, what about the impacts, right? What to watch for? Well, I do think the main concern is going to be that potential to deal with some flash flooding. Now, that being said, I don't think it's going to be dealing with, a widespread flash flooding risk. I do think that, we're under that marginal risk as we go from Friday through the weekend, where it does likely stay more isolated or localized, primarily affecting places that can experience rapid runoff under that level 1 of excessive rainfall outlook. This is a product issued by the Weather Prediction Center, has our location in that level 1 from Friday, Saturday, and into Sunday. And yeah, I do think that, is certainly our primary concern as we look ahead going through the weekend, is that potential to deal with some localized or isolated flash flooding. We just have some torrential downpours within these thunderstorms and even some heavy downpours within showers. And I don't want to underplay, even we can deal with some flooding concerns even from showers if they are lingering over the same location for a long period of time. A lot of moisture for these showers and thunderstorms to tap into. So it is something that, while isolated, and most of us likely don't experience it, it is something we just have to continue to closely monitor here over the next 3 days, as it is possible. While isolated, it's possible as we go through the weekend. You notice the severe weather outlook. This is a product issued by the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma. It does not have us under any severe threat for Friday or into Saturday. And they issue the current day, and then 2 days into the future, the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma issues those outlooks going into a stretch of 3 days, including, the current day. So it does not carry over into Sunday. But, despite the Storm Prediction Center not having us in a risk for severe weather, we still run that potential, much like what we've seen as of recent. Yes, we still can get some high winds. It's likely more isolated, just like the potential for flash flooding. But I think, in general, what to watch for is that potential for, isolated or localized flash flooding, and the potential to deal with some, in general, some gusty winds within these thunderstorms, but even possibly more of that stray damaging wind gust with the downburst possible within these thunderstorms. Again, likely nothing widespread. I don't think we're tracking a severe weather outbreak here as we go through the weekend. That's not likely. But do we get a strong to severe thunderstorm over the next 3 days? I think it is certainly possible. I do. And again, if we do see a severe thunderstorm, what are we watching for? A high wind gust potential, high winds. Not likely a tornado activity, likely not dealing with a whole lot, if any, large hail, primarily just that high wind potential, even though stray. Maybe we do see, a damaging wind gust reported or wind damage reported somewhere in our area over the next 3 days. That's really what we're watching for. So again, the primary concern likely dealing with some that potential for isolated flash flooding over the next 3 days. And then behind that, maybe deal with some high wind gusts within a storm or two over the next 3 days. And in general, some gusty winds, frequent lightning, torrential downpours. That's what to expect likely in a lot of these thunderstorms, just in general. It's just that they can get a bit excessive, right, at times. So maybe a storm does start to produce some excessive amount of rain or excessive high winds, and that will be more isolated, right? So what to expect in general: frequent lightning, torrential downpours, some gusty winds, but on more isolated and of a scale it does possibly become more excessive in dealing with those rain amounts and dealing with those wind speeds. So that is what to watch for here over the next 3 days. The emphasis, yes, will be in the afternoon and evening with the timing wise, and those risks will likely diminish then overnight, even though we can see some showers and thunderstorms continue. The emphasis will certainly be when we're dealing with the greatest coverage of the showers and thunderstorms, which will likely be more in line with the afternoon and evening. So that's what to watch for. And of course, we'll be keeping a very close eye on this activity as we do go through the evening, to make sure to stay tuned there with Nathan at Chut News 9 and Chut WTOV. When our weather starts to turn more active with those showers and thunderstorms, I try to make sure to post some frequent updates on, areas of concern, right, to watch. If we're starting to watch an area where we're seeing this heavy rain start to linger over a location, try to give you a heads up by posting to Nathan Chut News 9 or Chut WTOV on X that, hey, watch out, could deal with some flooding here shortly, or also if we're dealing with some gusty winds, hey, watch out if this gains a little more steam, may start to produce some damaging winds, right? Try to keep on top of that, not only during News 9 Live at 5 or News 9 at 10 on Fox 9 or News 9 tonight at 11, but also trying to give some of those updates on social media as well, on my personal page there at Nathan Chut News 9 and Chut WTOV. So try to keep you, ahead of that weather the best I can going throughout these afternoon evenings. And I will be here tomorrow. So we'll be tracking anything in the afternoon and evening hours that could become strong to severe or any potential there for flooding. I'll keep you updated as we go throughout the latter part of your Friday and into Friday night. Again, more scattered showers and thunderstorms then continuing Saturday and Sunday. Most of this will likely occur in the afternoon and evening, but at least a few of them can be lingering overnight Friday as well as Saturday. That activity will then likely taper off rather early Sunday night, and then we're dry into Monday morning. Isolated pop-up possible Monday afternoon and evening, dry Monday night, possible pop-up Tuesday afternoon and evening, likely dry Tuesday night. And then Wednesday, we could see a further uptick. We deal with that cold front passage, so we could see a further uptick in coverage of showers and thunderstorms around the middle of next week. It's a bit of a timing, question mark at this point. If it's more of a timing of Tuesday night into Wednesday, it can reduce the coverage of showers and thunderstorms. If it's more of a timing of that frontal passage into Wednesday afternoon, then yes, we can see greater coverage of showers and thunderstorms. There's a little bit of a question mark on the exact timing of that frontal passage around the middle of next week. But when it does pass, we can see a further uptick in those showers and thunderstorms, coverage of those showers and thunderstorms. And then behind that is when rain chances should just drop off completely late next week into the following weekend. And that's when we start that stretch right in line with the beginning of August of dealing with some of those cooler temperatures, lower humidity. So yes, the relief is in sight. At least some relief there for a stretch of time right at the beginning of August, because yes, by the time we get into that second week and going towards the middle of August, we can see temperatures, the humidity, it can climb back up. But at least we get a stretch there of what looks to be a few, maybe a handful of days into the beginning of August and the very tail end of this month that we get into a more pleasant stretch of weather, more enjoyable to be outside stretch of weather coming our way at that point. Austin says can still feel the hot mugginess this evening. Yeah, and that's the kicker with this as well. Not only hot and humid into the afternoon hours, but just warm and muggy at night. Just not much relief. Not much relief even overnight. It does not get cool and not get comfortable, right? It is just hot and humid and warm and muggy. I wouldn't say that overnight's hot and humid, but you could argue it's pretty warm and humid, pretty warm and humid as well. It's just not comfortable, right? It's just not comfortable even overnight, going throughout the course of this weekend and into early next week. But at least there's that relief in sight going into the following weekend. Patrick joining us from Wheaton, West Virginia. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Aaron says, giving us a news report, suspect has been running from the cops since 4 p.m. in Caddis. Sheriff and cops are everywhere. Thanks for the tip there, Aaron. Appreciate it. And Michael saying, ground them planes that are flying over us and dumping whatever to make it rain. We've had plenty, and that is not the culprit of our weather pattern, Michael. Unfortunately, hate to break it to you, but that is not the culprit of this weather pattern. But certainly, dealing with this humid conditions that we've been in, and this is the type of pattern that with this humidity we haven't seen in quite some time. But certainly, this humidity has been one of the factors leading into just the horrendous flooding that we've seen in spots across the country, and of course here at home as well. You're dealing with just this very humid stretch of weather. This has been the most humid stretch that we've had in place here into our summer months on record for the Wheeling area, and it's been over 100 years since we've had this kind of humid stretch here going into June and July. That we've had over 100 years in Pittsburgh. So, that's climate records dating back to the late 1800s. We have to go back towards 1916, I believe it was, the last time we had, this kind of a humid stretch that we had at the end of June into, what was. We just broke it here earlier this week, but up until that point, going into the end of July as well, that pretty much month-long stretch of around June 21st to July 21st, roughly that month-long stretch that we had of just some humid conditions. Yeah, it was rough. Certainly rough dealing with some of that humid conditions, and what the pattern we're going back into certainly more reminiscent of what we just came off of for a month. But now we're going to get back here towards the beginning of August, where we don't have to wait a whole month, just about a week, and then thankfully some relief is in sight into the following weekend for the beginning of August. Well, I thank you so much. I appreciate it, as always, to everyone tuning into this edition of Nate at 8. I appreciate it as always. Hope everyone had a wonderful day and tried to stay cool. I know it's hard. As Bill Phillips always used to say when we talk on Sunrise, bring out the garden hose. Any way to cool down, that's for sure. Jump in a pool nearest lake and cool down. Yeah, it's been rough here as of recent. And unfortunately, we've got to hold on to about another week before, thankfully, we'll start to see that drop in those temperatures and humidity. And of course, stay weather aware here over the next 3 days, especially into the afternoon, evening. And, have multiple ways to get any warnings that are issued, as yes, that potential, while most of us likely don't see it come to fruition as it's more isolated, and that potential for flash flooding is there, and that potential for a strong to severe thunderstorm is there. If we do see a thunderstorm become severe, high winds would be the primary concern. Those are the two, potential impacts that we've been really dealing with here as of recent, and that looks to just carry over here as we go through the weekend as well. So just something to be aware of. Keep in mind, keep weather aware over the next 3 days. We'll be dodging some rounds of rain coming our way now as we go through the weekend. And of course, make sure to stay tuned with me. I'll bring you the latest coming up, News 9 at 10 on Fox 9, News 9 tonight at 11. And as always, for that next edition of Nate at 8, the Friday evening edition of Nate at 8 coming up tomorrow evening. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a wonderful night, and I'll see you on the next edition of Nate at 8.